Oh, landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess, and I hope you're doing good. I hope you're having a great day, but do me a favor and hit that like button to the terrorists win. And on a recent live stream we went in on the 704 gear Urban Ranger Lite V2. So let's take a look at what we're holding, because it'll bother you if I don't. And you know I love you. So first things first, and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We got the orange G10 here. We got a thumb stud. Let's flick the stud. We have got a little under 3 inches of 14C 28N steel, and we are on an axis lock. And we do centrifugal open. Love it. So I carried this, and I found a couple of small drawbacks. Nothing world-breaking, nothing catastrophic, but this thing is thick for something this small. That made it feel like a brick in the pocket. And the thumb studs look a little bit goofy sticking out that far. And of course, I handed it to a buddy of mine to take a look at, and the first thing he said was, wow, these thumb studs stick out. So yeah, they definitely stick out. But we did Cardboard Slayer on this thing, and this is something that a lot of you guys have been asking me. A lot of you guys have been asking me to check out 704 gear. You've been asking for 704 gear, so we are taking a look at 704 gear. We'll circle back around to that at the end of the video, so stay tuned. But yeah, I carried it. Solid unit. It's really solid outside of being a brick in the pocket. Just that one shortcoming. But when we started on this, let's go to the car hole real quick, and I'll show you the pile that we got off of the factory edge. Here you go. All right, folks, welcome back to the car hole, and here we have the pile of cardboard made by the Urban Ranger Lite V2 from 704 gear on the factory edge. Not huge, but definitely not the worst that we've seen on 14C 28N. I'm okay with it. All right, so you saw the pile on the factory edge. Not too shabby. Not a gigantic pile. I'd certainly love to have seen a bigger pile, but not too shabby for 14C 28N. It did decent. But let's get into our timeline of events. So we started when we found a 251 and 239 on the edge sharpness tester. And we went for an hour, and we found a 358 in the center. Now, after that first hour, I started feeling what might be a bit of a hot spot showing up right here. It was starting to feel a little bit funky, but no real hot spots. It never got any worse than that. I just felt the pressure from all the push cuts that I was doing right here in the pinky. It put pressure here, and it put pressure here. It wasn't bad. Like, really, the hot spots weren't really an issue. So, very, very good on them. And I think a lot of that is the blocky shape. Definitely helped out on that. It spread the force out across here, across a wider contact patch than another knife would have done. So that definitely helped out and worked to its advantage. But at the 2 hour mark, we hit a 586 in the center and a 529. Again, no real hot spots. 2.5 hours, 574, 552 at the heel 415. But back in the center, we found a 621. And at that 621... we stopped because we started seeing these cuts right here intermittently, and as you can see, that's not a cut, that's a tear. So, you know, we stopped cutting at that 621, and we sharpened her down to 400 grit, and we stropped it to 5 micron and got it to a 194, which for a 400 grit edge doesn't seem to be too shabby. We just started doing this, so we're getting data points as we go. Broke out the 1-inch rope. We got 8 rope cuts, and then at the center, we found a 279 and a 311. It wasn't cutting anymore. Like, pushing through, I probably could have forced it, but my ancestors said that's enough, my child. We haven't standardized that yet, but now I have a standard that I'm shooting for is 10 rope cuts, and then see how many points it loses over the course of those 10 cuts. We're going to go with that moving forward, but for the 14C 28N, I was expecting fewer rope cuts. I was expecting somewhere around 5, maybe 6. 8 doesn't seem to be too bad. So we sharpened her down to a 143 and went in for round 2. So let's go back out to the car hole, and I'll show you the pile of cardboard that we made off of the new 17 degrees per side edge. And of course, we went up to 3,000 grit, and we polished her down to 0.1 microns on the strop. But let's go out to the car hole. Here you go. All right, and we're back in the car hole, and here's the pile of cardboard made by the brand new 17 degrees per side edge on the Urban Ranger Lite V2. So, and if you're wondering why I keep saying the name of the knife, it's so I don't get this mixed up with the other ones that I'm doing in one big batch right now. So, yeah. That's the pile. Not too shabby. Now I got to pick all this back up off the floor and put it in boxes. Avenge my death. Okay, so you can see that pile was real similar. It was a really similar pile, which we've been seeing recently here was the pile stayed consistent between the two edges. I think this thing was already really close to 17 degrees before we started, which is probably why. When I went in to sharpen it, it didn't take too much to get the material removed to get her to the reprofiled edge that I like. I think it was pretty close to 17 degrees before we started. So not too shabby on them, not too shabby on that. Definitely happy to see that. But, you know, we started at a 143, and then after an hour we checked and we found a 544 in the center and a 370. I don't trust that 544. That seemed way too high, but the 370, that lines up with the first run pretty effectively. After 2 hours, we found a 402, a 354, and a 558 in the center. That 558 raises an eyebrow or three. But, you know, on the first round, we found a 586 and a 529 at the 2 hour mark, so not too shabby. At the 2 hour and 45 minute, at 2 hours and 45 minutes, we saw 531, 576, and 656. No real hot spots to speak of, but at that 656, check that out. Like, that is devastated. That is the highest level of devastation we have seen in a long time on those cuts. Somehow, it kept cutting pretty cleanly until we hit 656. There were some intermittent bad cuts, but somehow it made it to 656 before we had to call it. That is actually kind of cool. That is impressive. But no real hot spots to speak of. Now, one thing that I did do is I loosened up the pivot a little bit to get it drop shutty, because right now it's not drop shut. The action isn't as free as I like. However, by doing that, we wound up with some side-to-side blade play, and I had to tighten it back down to factory, and then no new blade play showed up. The side-to-side blade play got pretty bad, but if you were to take some thread locker and put it in there and tighten it down to where you're happy with it, you could get a nice loose drop shut action with no side-to-side blade play, no problems. If I were to continue carrying this for a long time, that's probably one of the first things I would do. But yeah, and then you guys, I decided to practice my freehand sharpening. I do that periodically just to try to get better at it, and I did one of my better sharpening jobs and got her down to a 159. So that was a pretty good job sharpening it. We can get some paper out. Yeah, you count. Centrifugal open. So yeah, that was a nice edge. Yeah, like it sharpened up really well, which I like seeing. My normal freehand sharpenings have been putting it around 200, so that 159 is a good number, which also says the steel is heat treated pretty well. So yeah, like the only real drawback I have found with this thing is in the pocket it feels like a bit of a brick. The thumb studs look a little bit goofy, but they don't make anything worse or better. They just look a little goofy. But yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a budget banger. Like I said, for about 30 bucks. Now, that being said, I actually had some communication with 704 Gear on the old Instagram, and he reached out to me and said, hey, I noticed you checked one of my videos out, and he said that this knife is one that's being discontinued. The Urban Ranger Lite V2 is being discontinued for some of the reasons I mentioned in the previous video. So he's sending me out some of their new button locks to check out, which is really damn cool. But this thing's being discontinued, and I think a lot of it is the design's a little bit goofy, and it's a bit of a brick in the pocket. So, yeah, keep an eye out. I'm looking forward to some new stuff. But as far as this goes, yeah, it's solid. No major complaints. Like I said, the gripe about it being a brick in the pocket. That being said, with it being a brick for me in the pocket, I gave it to my buddy. He's the same guy who pointed out the thumb studs. He put it in his pocket, and he had no problems reaching into his pocket, getting stuff out around it. However, I did. So your mileage will definitely vary. But yeah, like I can't think of a lot else to add about this. It's just that was an interesting experience, especially with it getting up to 656 on the edge before it finally crapped out. Like, that is mildly impressive. So, you guys know I love sharing with you what happened during Cardboard Slayer. That's what happened to the 704 Gear Urban Ranger Lite V2. So, all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We got our live streams, the regular videos. There's plenty of activities. Comments, I love some feedback. Let me know what you think about this thing, or whether or not you've got some 704 gears and how they treat you. And all that being said, y'all have a nice day.